Hey, everybody, welcome to the Living.Fit show. This is your host, Jesse Grund, and I am here with, I like to call him a friend, but he's also a huge influence on what I do and a huge influence in the entire mobility and exercise world right now. This is Dennis Dunphy. Dennis is one of the creators of Stick Mobility. If you haven't seen Stick Mobility, it's an amazing invention. It's one of those few innovations that's really satisfying a need in the fitness world in a big way, one of those big changes. And we're really, really happy to have Dennis here. Dennis, welcome to the show. How are you today?
What's up, brother? Appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for having me. I'm always humbled and to be asked to be on these shows. So it's always a great experience, especially getting to talk with you as always, sir.
Yeah, it's great. So Dennis and I have known each other for a long time. I took the stick mobility course. Oh my gosh, back in 2017 or 16. I got to go back and look. I got my certification somewhere. If you can't see, I've got a wall of certs behind me, everybody. But I got to take that course. I didn't meet Dennis at that course. I met one of the other inventors at the time, but we've connected since. We actually did some work with the Braves together, which was a really good time when we were in town. So it's always good to be able to sit down and talk with you. Even though I'm in Florida and you're in California, so coordinating times can be a struggle sometimes.
Yeah, 3 hour time difference can throw a wrench into a lot of things.
Especially when you text people and you're like, hey man, good morning, and then you realize, oh crap, it's 4 a.m. over there. Don't
Yeah,
send that text. Put it to the side.
that's funny. That's true. Very true. Very true.
Uh, so if people aren't familiar with stick mobility, can you talk a little bit about what stick mobility is? And a little bit about how it came to be, how it became this modality that is now being used by pro teams, pro athletes, all the way down to Gen Pop.
The stick mobility, we're a movement company. We just use a specially designed stick to really allow the user to get a better feel and awareness of what they're actually doing. I think we see that a lot of times that there's a lack of body awareness, but we use the stick to really, first of all, help mobilize your joints. That's the very first thing. Well, joints need to understand their roles and their functions, what they're capable of doing, reestablishing that space in the joint that a lot of people lose over time. And then we use a lot of strength training because for us, it's mobility requires strength, and a lot of times when we see people doing mobility work, it is not work. It is the farthest thing. So it's like Neil and I say, if your mobility work is not work, then you need to kind of reassess what it is, right? And then and I think that's what surprises most people that do take the course is how much strength training there really is involved in the course. And then we finish up with the stretching, which is what typically most people see on social media. But that's typically only about 10-15% of what our system really is about, is the actual end range stretching and building strength in that end range position. But we came up with it because we were doing stick stretching. We were introduced to stretching with the stick from a chiropractor, Dr. Arthur Fagenholtz, over in Santa Cruz, California. Great person, great human being. And but we realized, well, you're kind of missing a lot of elements, right? So, especially the isometric component and what that can bring to the ball game. So, we said, hey, we're going to create our own system. So he's like, yeah, go right ahead, feel free to. And so that's how Stick Mobility was born. So that was back in 2015. And end of 2014, because we launched in May of 2015. That was our very first time that we hit social media. And so we took about a good 6 to 8 months to really figure out, what components we needed to put into the system and get people moving better. And then it was about 2016 is when we released our actual education platform.
How did the stick itself evolve over time? So obviously you started with us just stretching with a stick, but now we have this bendy,
Yeah.
flexible thing. Like, how did that occur?
Yeah, we were first using rattan sticks, so it's kind of a version of bamboo. Problem is they were really inconsistent dimensions because it's an organic material, right? So you can't really form it to your desired outcome all the time. So that was an issue there. And then we went to PVC. But your PVC that you get in the local hardware store, the problem with that was it really warps really easily. So, and it's super lightweight. It can't take a lot of weight and pressure. So that was a big issue for us, especially when we're doing lateral bow and arrows and especially monkey hangs when you're hanging on the stick. We needed something that was going to be a lot stronger. Because when you ask somebody to hang from a stick, they've got to have the reassurance in their head that this thing's going to hold their body weight, right? So that was a big issue there. So we had some Neil has some clients who deal with aeronautics. So they were like, hey, we can create a stick for you. So they created some prototypes and we played around with them for a little bit. And then we came up with the what you see today. So then from there, as far as the color combination, that was more just uh, getting color combinations and asking people, which ones did they gravitate to, and then orange and black was over the overwhelming choice that caught people's eyes. So it's orange is a very therapeutic color, but it's also a color that sticks out. So it's hard to miss. And most gyms, as you know, are pretty black and white. They like black, white, dark colors. So when you get a bright orange stick sticking, somewhere in the gym, uh, it draws attention. So from a marketing standpoint, it's something that we wanted because we want people to walk into a gym and notice it, not just ignore it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's I love doing the black and white photos of somebody working with a stick in my studio and then just coloring in the orange. It just pops. It's just
Yeah.
this whole like attention grab to it whenever you see it, which is so cool to see. Well, how did it come about changing the sizes? So obviously we've got 7s, 6s, 5s, 4s, and 2s. How did that come about? How did the sizes start to become a thing, and what's the difference in the sizes? How do you use them?
So we don't make the 3-footer anymore, so that's gone.
Ah, okay.
So if
I
anybody
got the
has,
OG. I got an
yeah, if you
OG then.
got three, you are one of the only ones to have those. So the 4 and the 5s we usually use for our mobilizations, joint by joint mobs, and some flow work, and ground based work, dead bug series, pigeons, pigeon poses, things of that nature. And then the longer sticks are the ones we use from our standing drills, of course, and the vast majority of our stretches. And a good amount of our isometric strength training drills are done with the longer sticks. So it's based off of height or wingspan more so than height. But because nowadays you have a lot of people that are maybe 5'10", but they have a 6'2" wingspan, that type of thing. So we generally speaking use height. Anybody over 5'10" is going to probably require the 7-foot sticks, upwards of 6 foot. But it can mostly, for the most part, we should be taking wingspan into account. So myself, I've got a shorter wingspan than my height, so 6-footers do just fine for me. But yeah, that's something that's just general guideline.
Yeah, I didn't know the 3 had been retired. Now I feel like I have a collector's item.
Yeah,
Um,
we nobody's really buying them. So and so we just were like, well, it is what it is, right? So the community didn't want them, so we stopped using them. And then of course, as soon as we stopped making them, that's when people are like, oh, you got those really short sticks, and we're like, well, we don't know. But
Hey,
we weren't really releasing a lot of content with the 3-footers though either, right? So
right.
uh, that was the other thing too, is people were getting them and going, okay, what do I do with these things, right? But
Mhm.
I mean, but like the 90-90 drills would have been really great with the 3-footer. So
Mhm.
are the next best thing to use. So
How so obviously it started with rattan, and then are you on like version like 4 or 5.0 of the stick, or has it been once you guys had that stick designed that that's the one that you've been using this whole time?
no, we made some slight modifications to it. So we really second a rendition to it. The one thing we've done is rebranded our logo. So the original half kneeling guy is gone. So now we have the 3 slashes. So it's the logo now is basically to represent the slash in the middle as the person, and then the 2 curved slashes on the side are the sticks flexing, so to speak. Plus 3 sticks, 3 slashes. So those are kind of the thought processes behind the new logo. So something just very succinct, simple to look at type of thing. So yeah, the rebranding was something that we came around with. We started thinking about it just a few years ago.
Did you, so when you're talking about the smallers versus the largers in regards to the joint by joint for the smaller and then the largers for the bigger, do you feel like working with the smallers or the biggers provide different challenges in regards to the isometric tension, or is it just a control thing by having a smaller stick means that you're going to be in a bit more control in the space that you're working in?
Yeah, typically, shorter sticks, shorter levers, easier to control. Longer sticks, longer levers, harder to control. We can switch. If we're doing grip work, arm line activation work with a shorter stick for somebody, and their strength is really good. We want to go into offsetting the lever to either work pronation, supination, anti rotation. If they're really super strong, then we can always bump it up to like a 6-foot stick and offset that lever if someone has some amazing grip strength. If you're working with a rock climber that's got massive amounts of grip strength, then you're going to want to think about, okay, how do I challenge this person? If how do I give this person the right dosage of stimulation? So that may be changing the stick length. And then on the other hand, it reverses, right? So we may have someone with limited range of motion or limited strength. So we may have to go with a shorter stick to overcome their lack of strength or in control, or we may have to go with a longer stick than normal because they have limited range of motion. Say, for instance, when they're doing T-spine reaches for the floor, right? They don't have a lot of mobility through their thoracic spine. So trying to get them into a ninja flow or a slap shot may be more of a struggle. So instead of using a 6-foot stick, we may give them a 7-foot stick because then they don't have to hinge as far. It can be a much less aggressive introduction into getting them to understand how to open up their thoracic rotation. And then we see progress where we can then eventually over time shift them over to a 6-foot stick.
When you were creating this stick, and obviously we have this movement-based practice that you guys have, was there a specific population that you had in mind when you were designing it? Or did you see it as this, what is now turned into cross-platform, cross-population, pretty much good for anyone and everyone?
Our thought was this is something for everybody. I mean, this it answered some questions on several fronts. I mean, number one, uh, a lot of people don't work out because they're massively intimidated by the environment, or they're massively intimidated by working with loads throughout. So there's that. And so I think what we did with the stick is we were allowed to give them something that removes that intimidation factor, especially with the aging population, right? You ask somebody in their 70s to let's work with some kettlebells. Well, they may be like, I don't know about that. Where, you introduce them with the stick, you start to give them a nice reform that foundation of strength for them, right? Movement and strength. And then all of a sudden they start to gain that confidence, right? You've removed that intimidation and those inhibitions, and now you've replaced it with confidence and empowerment. And then hopefully down the road, you say, hey, why don't we use this kettlebell today? And they go, oh, okay, all right, okay, I feel good. All right, let's give it a shot, right? So, for us, it was that nice. It removed that barrier to entry for a lot of people, right? And then, as far as the people that do move well, it gave us something to really help them link everything together that they may have been missing. Maybe they lack a little bit of a connection along a pathway along one of the anatomy trains, and so we can use the stick as a closed chain tool to really lock that back in, right? So we know with elite athletes, most of them are very good compensators. So, if we see something that they're just they're glossing over, so to speak, we can use the sticks as a way to slow things down, allow them to get that stability and be able to work through that movement a little bit slower so we can really reestablish a nice solid neuromuscular base all the way through the entire movement.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, it's funny when you tell somebody like, "Hey, by the way, athletes tend to not be great movers. They just tend to be really good at moving for their sport." And
Mhm.
people are like, "What do you mean? Like, look at them. Like, look at this Adonis. Like, they are perfect. They have to be perfect, right?" And then you're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I mean, they're really good at doing whatever it is that they do,
Mhm.
and they've just become so good at it that they push other things aside to be great at that one thing." So it's really interesting to hear you talk about some of the same conclusions that I've come to, and I think other coaches have come to. I'd say we're probably in the minority uh, in that factor. We just are openly like, hey, athletes are not great movers inherently. Just because they're a great athlete doesn't mean that they're a great mover. A lot of times, they're like you said, they're covering up compensations.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is our field is still really new to so to speak, right? We haven't been at this for a very long time, and training really got its roots from bodybuilding, right? So,
Mhm.
uh, let's be honest, bodybuilders are not who you really want to go talk to when you want to really learn how to move well, right? So that proliferated training to start with, and so now we're starting to see a third and fourth generation of trainers coming along that have a lot more education. Things have changed. Our education has become a lot better. Our understanding of the human body has come a long way. It still has a long way to go, but it's come a long way. And we're starting to realize that yes, things that we used to do probably aren't the best things for certain people. So that's the things that we've started to make changes with. And yeah, as far as dealing with with training, I think what's interesting is seeing how athletes, when you really slow something down that they're used to doing really fast all the time, their eyes get really wide and they start to realize, oh crap, this is a lot harder than it should be, so to
Mhm.
speak. So that's one of those things where it's always kind of interesting to see their reaction. And so, yeah, you take something that they do fast, you bring it down to about a 10-second repetition, and that's a
Mhm.
vastly exercise altogether. But and I think that's the fun of what we do is introducing athletes and general population to something different, a little bit more real life application, so to speak.
For sure. Now, speaking of athletes and just generally speaking, where do you see the stick and stick mobility as part of a well-rounded strength and conditioning program? If somebody's doing lots of things, like where do you see the stick as a part of that program?
For me, I think the stick is number one recovery based tool. I think that's the very first thing for most people is that's going to be where they gravitate to it the most is the recovery aspect. But I think for me, I if you see a client, someone you're working with having some issues through a movement or something's locked up, then grab a stick and get them to kinesthetically understand what you're trying to get them to do, right? So it's the easiest way for them to simply, you put them in a position, you ask them to push or pull on the stick, and all of a sudden they start to feel that network connecting. And so that's one of the things that I love doing with the stick is if someone doesn't understand a movement, okay, let's grab a stick and let's have you put you in the position. Now do this, turn your body or extend your arms and now push into the stick, pull into the stick. And then you ask them, do you feel this pathway? Do you feel this network, this connection from, let's say, your right arm to your left glute, right? And they go, oh, I feel that. Cool. Now, as you go back into your open chain movement now, or your loaded movement, now you want to feel that same exact pathway connecting there too. And so that's where we see the greatest return. But yeah, I think for me personally, I think the stick should be in every facility. I'd like to see it right there with, you see foam rollers in every gym, everywhere. You see resistance bands. I think there's just standard equipment that every facility is going to have and or should have, and I think sticks are going to be one of them.
Very cool. Did you foresee what's kind of happened with stick? I mean, we talked about this off air before we started, but you just started, the company's only probably seven years old at this point,
Oh,
and
going
now
on.
like going on 8. So now we're seeing this as warm-ups on, you see it at the NBA. We've seen it at multiple pro sports levels. We see it pretty much, celebrities using it. Like, did you guys ever foresee, hey, this stick that we came up with is going to be this huge thing that's going to grow into what it's grown today, where you're marketed across the world?
No, I didn't. Not by any means. When we first started, honestly, it was just to increase our business personally, right? Let's throw some stuff out there on social media, and let's start running some group classes, which we did, right? So we were running group classes on the weekend, which the attendance was really good. So that's, we started there, and then okay, if we pick up some new clients for one-on-one work or small group, great, let's do that. And so that's where that was really all we had in mind, was just helping us out personally, just locally, small, logistically here in San Jose. But when we hit social media, it was really surprising to see uh, how quickly things started to grow and where it started to grow. I think that was the other thing. We were like, oh, wow, this is like, we're getting people from all over the world jumping onto our account. And, we were getting 50 to 60 new followers a day, which I think for a non-celebrity based account was pretty good. So we were rocking
Mhm.
and rolling. So for us, the wake up call that we were on to something really big was when when the Cincinnati Bengals and Chip Morton got a hold of us, and that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is big. This is not something that's going to go away, and so we've got something here. So I know a lot of people with with tools and with systems spend years before they get into anything with a pro sports team. And for us, it was like our very first thing. So it was kind of like, ew. It was intimidating, to be honest with you, because never having worked with that level of organization. But the validation was really great, and I think that's what really helped us out. Was it gave us that, hey, you guys are legitimate. No matter what anybody says, what you guys are doing is good. It's needed. It's a missing part of the industry, and so that's what's really fueled us.
Which is really cool. I mean, Hong Kong, Dubai. I mean, you guys are doing education all over the place. And I kind of want to talk about the education system a little bit. So how did that, obviously you build the stick and then go, hey, we're going to build this whole education system with it? Or did you kind of have an idea of the education system as you were building the stick?
No, we had how we use the stick lined up in what segments and what drills. But as far as actual course structure, no, that wasn't until Chip asked us. Chip was like, "Hey, you guys have a course?" And we said no. So we know what to do with this, so we just put people through workouts. And he goes, "Well, why don't you build a course?" And he goes, "And once you get the course done, then," he goes, I want first crack at it." And so we said, "Okay." So we took a good 6 months of research, citations, studying scientific material to back up and validate what we were teaching, understanding the principles and that we're using with the stick. And that's the big thing, is to bring legitimacy to whatever tool or system you're using. When you can back it up with scientific principles, who's going to argue that, right? They can't discount it, right? And I think that's what has really validated us, is like, look, there's 5 scientific principles we're using, right? Leverage, stability, irradiation, feedback, isometrics, and coordination. So you can't argue that those are scientific principles that everybody needs to understand, or should have an ability to understand and use. So once we did that, then we were up and running. We worked with him and his staff, and then we started opening it up to the general public, and it was really good. Things were great, and then COVID hit, so that slowed things down drastically. But
Mm.
level 1 course, we were doing pretty well. And like we said off air before the interview, for us, Southeast Asia is our biggest market. So it's different parts of the world have different prioritization on health and fitness. So Southeast Asia is very much more into the movement quality, so to speak. So that's, I think, a big reason of why they are our biggest market.
Mhm. So obviously I took the level one. It started with the level one, and now we've eventually evolved into a more advanced level two. Can you tell me a little bit of the difference between the level one and the level two, and how you guys are really in the level two kind of advancing how we use a stick with other modalities?
Yeah, so level 1, I mean, we first of all, we're giving people a lot of information that they may not be familiar with, so to speak. And we're really, in many aspects, kind of bringing a different thought process, or a novel thought process, to the training community that they're just not accustomed to. So there's a lot of information that we throw at them in that level 1, and it takes a lot of time for them to digest. So the level 2 is just going deeper into those principles and going farther down the rabbit hole of each of them. But it's really about also expanding your options within those principles. So level 1 would give you the base principles, give you the base drills using those principles. And then level 2, we say, okay, you may have to use something opposite of what we told you in level 1, right? So, typically when we have somebody set up with the sticks, we tell them, hey, let's say, traditionally speaking, for a typical standing hip drill, we'll say, hey, place the sticks at 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock, with the bottom of the stick slightly angled in towards you. And we do that because when we ask people to push the sticks into the floor, it follows your natural trajectory of your arm drive towards your center mass. But that narrow base with your feet and then the 2 sticks is a narrow tripod, right? It's a small tripod. So when somebody lifts their foot off the ground, maybe they're not as steady as we want them to be. So perhaps then we need to actually do the opposite and move the bottom of the sticks really out far to give them that nice big tripod position, so they are super stable. So that's basically what level 2 is doing, is saying, okay, you got all this material from level 1. Hopefully you've been practicing and utilizing it. Now you may be encountering exceptions, or people that are outside the norm, so to speak, or need a little bit different adaptation or improvisation to the drill. So here we go. Here's level 2. And here's some other options, because for us, the more options you have available to you, the better you're going to be.
So, you have this education system, we have product, we have apparel. Where do you kind of see this in the next 5 years? Where do you see stick mobility going, or where would you like to see it going? Obviously, we've talked about it being in every facility, but and unless you're going to drive around for the next 5 years across the world and put one in every facility, you're going to need people to buy it. So where do you really see stick mobility in the next 5 years?
Oh, I mean, it starts with people like yourself. It starts with coaches. And so that's our big thing, is we've got to get more of the training communities at the training level involved in with the education and knowing how to use the stick and its benefits of when to use it. So that's the number one thing. So yeah, in 5 years from now, I'd love to see the amount of coaches that we have certified worldwide at least triple or quadruple in that. So that's a big start there. And clinically speaking, that's a big target area for us, is clinically speaking. So that's something that we're currently working on now, because if we can get something medically cleared as far as education and product are concerned, that is a total game changer for us. Because there are way more clinicians than there are trainers and coaches in the world. So if you all of a sudden have a clinical application that's approved by medical boards across the world, well, then that is a complete game changer, because now you take something that can become basically a prescription, so to
Mm,
speak. So, clinicians can say, okay, here's your prescribed routine, and here's your stick, here's your sticks. Now you're going to do these drills at home. And then, once, like you've experienced with training other people that you work with, when you give people the stick and some simple cues, their faces light up. They get it. They're like, oh man, this feels amazing, right? And when you see the face light up and you hear that little feedback go, oh my God, this feels so good, you got them, right? So
mhm.
you have a user that's like, okay, I know I can always rely on this tool and these movements to help me feel better.
Yeah. The first time you get somebody in a bow and arrow and they really feel it, they're like, why have I never done this before?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Right? Just even a monkey hang with some rotation,
mhm,
right? I mean,
mhm,
Dan talked years ago about hanging daily, right? But who does that, right? I mean, hardly anybody does that. If you
right.
come across 1,000 people off the street, you may find one or two people that hang on a regular basis, and that's very slim. So just the fact that when we get people in a split stance monkey hang and add some rotation, and they're like, oh my God, their brain just goes, we've been missing this. So
Mhm.
and so right away when you see that expression and you get that verbal feedback, you're like, yep, okay.
Do you have any advice for first time stick mobility users? Guy goes online, he buys two sixes and a four. What's your advice to somebody who's just starting out with the sticks?
So yeah, I would say go to our YouTube channel. We've got a ton of content on the YouTube channel. It's broken up to basically, let's say, upper body, lower body, shoulders, back, hips, feet and ankles, things of that nature. So, if whatever you feel is needs to be worked on, or if you got some hips that feel a little bit tight or restricted, then go to the YouTube channel, look up the hip drills, and start working on those. Or find, if you want, on our website, we do have a trainer locator tab. So if you can find a coach in your area, that would be the next best thing, or probably the best thing to do, because then you've got some professional supervision to make sure that you're in the right place, right? So we know a lot of people don't have that understanding of where their joints are in space, right? They just don't know if what it is. So when you're trying to target certain tissue lines, you need that joint position specificity. So if you're missing it, that's probably a reason why you're not feeling what we want you to feel. So in that case, yeah, you're going to want some professional supervision to make sure maybe your hips are externally rotated when you're trying to stretch your hip flexor and you're not getting the hip flexor, things of that nature. So those are the two biggest things that I would recommend for new users.
Very cool. Well, where can we find, Stick Mobility? Where can we find more about you? And is there anything cool that's happening anytime soon for Stick Mobility? Hosting anything? Are you guys going to be doing anything live? Tell the people, and I'll try and put it out there.
Okay. Stickmobility.com. That's where the shop is. Also, for trainers or coaches out there that are interested in taking the education, that's where our certification courses, our live courses are listed. We do have them in online study at home platform. So we do have that option if traveling or trying to find 2 days just set aside by itself is difficult to do. We do have that online version available to you. As far as stuff that we're working on right now, yeah, it's the clinical aspect is what we're really trying to work on right now. Is that uh, the social media? We're giving a little bit more tutorials. So we did stop doing our live 45-minute classes. Those are all available on YouTube, though. So there's a lot of them, folks. So if you go to our YouTube, there all I think upwards of almost 245-minute workouts.
Mhm.
So you're more than welcome to take those. Uh, if the movement that the coach is going over seems a little bit too extensive to you or a little bit too much, then of course do what your body feels is acceptable or doable. So go at your own pace, so to speak. And then, yeah, so we're working on the clinical and really start making sure that we get a little bit more tutorial content out on social media.
Very cool. Well, Dennis, thank you for joining me on the Living Fit Show. I really appreciate it. I look forward to everybody learning more about stick mobility and implementing it as a part of their daily program. I know I do it myself. So, thank you very much for being on.
Thanks, Coach Jesse. I appreciate your time. And as always, thank you for having me on, brother. Appreciate it, man.